Extras. Tales 27 was a perfectly good episode, but it wasn't quite the story I had wanted, because I was only 2/3 of the way through illustrating the script, and it was already 25 minutes long and late. The script was so overlong that what I had originally planned for the episode was this combined with all of episode 28. The only thing I added was the post-credits stinger of 27. That's about 45 minutes for what are supposed to be 20 to 30 minute episodes now, proving once again that I have no damned clue how to edit scripts for time, and clearly wouldn't survive in a non-internet medium like TV. Then again, most TV shows aren't written, voiced, illustrated, and edited by a single person. Just as time was a factor in production, it was a factor of the adventure itself. There really should have been more layers of protection around the Spirit Shackle. It could have been a real full dungeon, something our campaign has been mostly lacking because of the kind of stories and plot hooks to which I gravitate. But I'm pretty sure back when I was planning this session, I had limited time to set it up, and I wasn't 100% certain the party would be willing to go to the Shadowfell for this seemingly random purpose. I wish I'd had more time to make it more of a dungeon, but instead I kind of focused on the riders, on trying to make that an interesting battle, and on what happens after. You know, all the stuff that got split off into the next episode. So, they fought a golem made of corpses, which was immune to anti-undead powers because it was a golem, a monster which counted as a construct rather than as undead. But if they are all made of a bunch of dead bodies, how the heck are you supposed to tell the difference between a big undead monster, a flesh golem, and this guy, which is technically a cadaver golem from Heroes of Horror? In scientific terms, or what I usually call thaumaturgical terms when talking about the scientific study of magical phenomena, undead are created when the body or spirit of a dead creature is reanimated by negative energy, the opposite, you could say antimatter, version of the positive energy that sustains the living. This could also be a collection of souls or corpses combined in any number of usually horrifying ways, so it could easily look like our so-called Corpse Golem. Constructs, on the other hand, are created by infusing arcane magic into inanimate matter to animate it, to give it the semblance of life and purpose. But the Flesh Golem, one of the standard golem types from 3rd Ed's Monster Manual 1, muddies the line by using parts of dead bodies as the inanimate material, in sort of Frankenstein's monster, and actually the cadaver golem is described as being even more like the monster from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, in that it gains a malevolent intelligence and a will of its own, not bound to the service of its creator. The cadaver golem actually has the ability to heal itself by consuming other flesh, and can even gain special powers by incorporating specific body parts from different creatures. And to be extra confusing, there's a high-level golem in another book that is made of negative energy, the undead stuff. So ultimately, when you start taking monsters from multiple books and settings, they aren't all going to make sense together without modification. How do you tell whether it's an undead mound of bodies or a golem made of bodies? With a skill check. Tiswell covered the known history of the amulet pretty thoroughly in the episode, and I'm not going to fill in any of the gaps, but I suppose I could give a little more detail on some of the people and events he mentioned. Valmont, for example. Normally a philandering half-elf, however successful, would not be a matter of historical record, especially half a millennium later. But the far north kingdom of Korstrad was in a very fragile state. Backing up a bit, in the years before the Shadow War, the king of Korstrad died without an heir, and the nation fell into the hands of a tyrant who stifled dissent, oppressed the barbarian tribes, and even started gladiatorial games. He was eventually overthrown, and while the throne was restored to a descendant of the Sons of Smith, the new lord, King Monorail IV's claim to the bloodline was pretty thin. It was a descendant of that king who tried to keep his nation out of the conflict which would later be called the Shadow War, and when he did finally join in against the orcs, against his better judgment, he was indeed slain in the final battle, about the same time as King Kelvoris fell. Though, of course, the Eladrin gets all the headlines. The death of this king proved too much for the once proud nation, When his grandsire took the throne, the people, the nobles, and even the nomadic tribes of Korstrad were all recovering from the reign of a tyrant, a common enemy so intimidating that few had dared to oppose him. But by the same token, the shadow of his reign was dark enough that the entire kingdom united behind the new lord of the Winter Palace, all working together to rebuild, to reclaim their country. By comparison, the Shadow War had seemed like a distant threat to many, and quite a few nobles and citizens, ironically, blamed their former king for bringing these tragedies upon them all, even though the rest of the world blamed him for refusing to enter the war until it was nearly too late. There were too many competing visions for how to move forward, and too few men or women who were able to stand out from the many challengers. There was a great deal of maneuvering and backstabbing, but a shaky, revolving-door alliance of dukes and barons managed to keep things from falling apart completely until key players lost what little trust they had for one another in the wake of the Valmont affair. None of the power players wept over the loss of the upstart bastard, but the swift brutality and questionable justice with which a jealous husband had him executed showed the other members of the council how close some of their fellows were to violence. And the first to show his more savage side was the first to fall in what soon became the Warring States period of Korstrad's history. The way Thiswell tells the story, the King of Rogues taking over the highways of the North sounds like a fait accompli, like it just happened, when really his rise to power could probably be a novel all on its own. Who the bandit was before he got the amulet, how he got a hold of it, even whether or not he even knew what it was, beyond a health amulet and maybe a good luck charm. All of that is unknown. But not long after acquiring the Collana, he staged several heists, each one earning him more wealth and attracting more skilled allies, culminating in the theft of the sovereign sword of Korstrad and the broken fragment of its hilt from the Winter Palace. And it was with this symbol that the King of Rogues rallied hundreds of men and women to his banner. His bold and fearless leadership attracted every thug, thief, skulker, and assassin in the capital region. It was too much fame, perhaps. One of the warlords, one of the rivals for the throne, mobilized his forces to take the bandits down. Whether this lord sought to prove his right to sit in the Winter Palace, or perhaps he took their challenge to authority as a personal affront. But the King of Rogues' large number of followers meant a larger hideout and also some weak links in the chain. A few bribes and a turncoat or two, and the hideout was besieged by soldiers. There was a fighting retreat through alleys, over rooftops, and through the sewers, leaving the remaining bandits on the run. The Lord claimed victory and branded the outlaws cowards, calling them the Cutpurse Legion. The King of Rogues embraced the name, though. Thugs and cutpurses? Perhaps, but a legion was strong, and he showed them all in the end. His campaign of revenge embarrassed and eventually dethroned that lord, and as other lords warred amongst themselves, the King of Rogues captured supply caravan after supply caravan, and soon his legion was not just bandits and ne'er-do-wells, but began to attract good men and women, deserters who wanted no more of war, and, well, you know the rest. When all the lords paid him off and he turned, in greed, to the nomadic tribes, even their prowess seemed no match for the rogues' daring and cunning strategies. But whether it was just blind chance, or whether fate or doom or hubris caused Dialiah herself to notice, maybe she wanted the amulet out of mortal hands, or maybe she just favored the nomadic hunters who were so much closer to nature. Whatever the reason, the King of Rogues was caught by a bear of terrifying size and devoured whole. The King of Rogues is a figure who is remembered by few nowadays, since the kingdom disintegrated completely in the centuries after that time, leaving the so-called barbarian tribes to inherit all the lands of Korstrad. How the amulet ended up in the Feywild centuries later is just another mystery, probably a dozen mysteries. Although gnome lifespans are long enough that Rylona's War, the Blackwood Treants affair, is actually within living memory for them, Angel is far too young for that, and knew only the broadest outlines. I think I'll leave all that for the Gnomes video. After hearing Thiswell try to connect these threadbare stories, though, some viewers noted that while the Collana Dialiah may bring out the strengths of the wearers, it seems to bring disaster upon them all in the end. Which raises an interesting question. Does an artifact like this innately attract doom to those who wield it? Or is it that giving mortals such power leads them to overreach and bring disaster upon themselves? Or is it their tragic ends themselves which twist the artifact's power over time to bring more of the same? Cause and effect can be very hard to tease apart. Fate, or destiny, is not a fixed value of the future. It's not a roadmap for what will happen. The Rajas see fate as a force of nature. They believe that if you can detect, measure, and quantify its magnitude, its direction, and other factors, then you need not be controlled by it. But if you don't understand that force, then, like a person who doesn't understand gravity, you may just walk off a cliff. I want to give a big thanks to all my generous Patreon patrons. If you've listened this far and want to support my channel directly, you can chip in at patreon.com/Demonac. And if you can't afford to, or just don't feel like it, remember, it doesn't cost you a dime to like and share Tales from My D&D campaign.